A similar divide to character memory versus player memory is character skill versus player skill. And where this usually gets debated, and it gets debated over and over again year after year, is whether or not there should be roleplay required before making a social role. Now, interestingly, these same people don't require that players get up and brawl with each other before they're allowed to make a combat roll, and they typically don't require someone to pick a lock before they get to roll to pick a lock. Why are they asking them to spout off a eloquent seduction or a stirring speech to the troops if they're not asking them to perform these other skills? I think it actually comes from traps. I think this trap came from traps. There is a certain school of thought that says that people should be describing how they look for traps in the room rather than relying on a percentile roll, and I can totally get behind that. Interacting with the world. But in that case, you're describing how your character looks around the room. You're not coming up with eloquent speeches. You're not wooing women. You're not seducing deities. Right? You're not running a con at a massive multinational corporation. You're describing your strategy. And you can do that in character. Actually, you can describe, kind of externalize the thought process. And you can present all of your character traits while doing so. So, what am I getting at? I'm getting at the point that very few games have a satisfying social mechanic. And so a lot of us tend to want that satisfaction to come from roleplay. And I'm also getting at the problem that even games that do have a satisfying social mechanic, players are often penalized for their ability to perform when what we're actually looking at is the character's ability to perform. In a simulation, we're trying to get at what life is like for the character. I already know how well I may speak in certain situations, or how well I might pick a lock, or how quickly I could take out an opponent. I don't need the game for that. What I'm trying to explore is the character. So, we're trying to be able to occupy the shoes of the character and explore different perspectives by making choices, deductions, and carrying out intentions as that character would. The decisions are ours. The framework is theirs. And at no point is it necessary to distance ourselves from that role by adding in the performance constraint of portraying the inner experience so that others may be entertained by it. Because if you're asking me to tell you exactly what I would say for this con, you're asking me to entertain you. You're not asking me to explore my character. That's how I see it. The enjoyment of other characters, like many other things in this style of gaming, is the experience. Right? Experiencing the process of figuring out what's going on, of getting to know them in the same way that you would get to know a real person, by watching them in action. It's a bit obvious, I hope, that my point that in the same way that we don't expect characters to duel, we shouldn't automatically expect them to be able to work these cons, or seduce these deities, or hack black ice. Characters exist to enable us to experience the point of view of beings that we are not. They may be more or less intelligent, they may be more or less charismatic, more or less violent than we are. The system allows us to experience the success and failures of these characters, right, as they would realistically experience them in their lives. Right? Their situations are created from our choices. Our choices are created by our growing understanding of the characters. So we place them in situations and we get to experience how they would react by getting into character, by immersing ourselves in the character. Not using the system, or rewarding or penalizing players for their own innate skill in some aspects, but not in others. Drops people out of the immersion, it prevents simulation, and if you're trying to run this type of game, it doesn't work. And I would argue it doesn't work in other styles of game either, but we can get into that in the comments if you like. Players do need to be invested in the game. They need to be invested in interacting with the world as their character would. A disinterest in the skills and abilities of your character is a clear and pervasive barrier to quality in this playstyle, the same as it is in any other. That said, it stands to reason that our skills and abilities and those of our characters will rarely be an exact match, and the system is a mean to bring those differences to light. At some point, the player needs to make decisions about what actions are to be taken or what conclusions are to be made. At some point, the resolution mechanic is invoked to determine how successful it has been. What manifests in this process is the description of intentions and the description of results. Each player is on a journey from zero immersion to deep immersion in their character, and some people are going to get there really quickly, and other people are never going to get there. If progress rates in your group are uneven toward your stated goals of immersion and simulation, work out how the players will interact with and as their characters, and do your best to remove any barriers that lead to the blending of the player and the character into I. In the end, couching all actions and intention as I do this or I think that is the outward sign of the player's immersion in the character. When action and thought are declared that way, we're on the right path. But we bring a lot of things to the table that maybe our characters can't do, and we can enjoy that as well. Enjoy the combat skill of martial artists in your group. If they're willing to get up and mime a duel, let them. It brings all kinds of things to light in flexible systems, like Ubiquity or perhaps Savage Worlds, where you can earn bonuses or take penalties for your application of real-world things. But this is supposed to be fun, and when the real skill is a shortcoming, you get my point. We can give strength to the 90-pound weakling. We can give a silver tongue to those who are afraid to speak or those who physically cannot speak. But we can meet people halfway and let the game do the rest. It's the reason why the game is there, to give foundations to our imaginings and lend them a semblance of reality for a while. Not everyone at the table needs to be able to interact with the game the same way. They need to be interacting with the game in an invested way. They need to work together as a group to make the experience that they seek come to life, working with each other, not against each other. Roleplay is a social hobby, and it requires communication of detail, intention, and description, as well as interaction with the other players and the evolving story. And we all have different capacities for this, and if you cannot handpick your players each and every time, then it stands to reason that trying to create an environment where skill can be developed and where people can have a good time just makes good sense.